Welcome, 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 everyone. You are in the right place if you are here for TRU Staffing Partners monthly Eye on Privacy webinar, where we cover all the emerging trends as it relates to the privacy job market, touching upon all the tangential things that are privacy and, according to our friends that put out a recent report, privacy and security, privacy and governance, privacy and AI. We're going to touch on some of those new trends on today's Eye on Privacy as well. As everyone is slowly coming into the room, I want to introduce my co-host today, who's one of my favorite people in the privacy vertical, the amazing founder, CEO, and very much subject matter expert and hands-on consultant with her customers and with me, the amazing Jodi Daniels from Red Clover. Say hi to everybody, Jodi.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. What an amazing, warm welcome. Can I talk to you every day? You're such an awesome mood booster.
You can talk to me every day. I will make the
We should
time.
do that. We should have coffee chat or like your cute little espresso chat. We're
I
gonna do
know.
that.
Yes, yes. I went out with the fine china for today as a honor to all of our guests, and because I like drinking from a small cup when it's a half an hour webinar. It's not a full hour, so there's only time for espresso, Jodi.
I love the snack size webinars. We do these as well, and it's just the right amount of time to pack so much information in. People can join and then continue on their merry way.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, let's get into the things that we're going to dissect a little bit today. And every month we cover some or all or a few of these points. What is the remote versus in-office versus hybrid? What are people paying at the point of hire for compensation? How does that relate to years in the past? What are the contract staffing trends versus direct hire FTE? We're going to break down all of that and more. We're going to hear all of Jodi's expert perspective and opinion on what she sees happening, being out there in the field every day, talking to a lot of the same people and a lot of different people than we are here at TRU. So with that said, here are all the events you can see TRU at over the next 2 to 3 months. Jodi will be at many of these. We've got tomorrow a webinar on AI specifically. So if you are looking for a really deep dive on what's happening with AI governance trends and the AI job market, TRU is moving in that direction, and we're going to give you some really great reporting. We're going to share a little bit of that, a teaser of that at the end of today, because I know Jodi's got some perspective specifically on the AI governance market. Let's talk about the trends right now on contract versus direct hire, Jodi. And as you can see, the amount of contract went down a little bit in the last month, and the amount of FTE went up a little bit. And this is based on people that we are tracking are actually accepting offers. So this is not based on jobs advertised, right? This is actual people accepting offers, because it's one thing to say what's being advertised, but as we well know, and according to the New York Times, more than 18% of those jobs are fake, not specific to privacy, but just generally speaking. We find that a lot of those jobs get posted and don't get filled. So our data comes from people actually taking jobs. And you still see here, Jodi, just how many more contractors are accepting positions on a monthly basis relative to FTEs. And I'm wondering what you think the cause of that is out there in the marketplace.
Well, I am seeing a number of companies who are choosing to shrink, let go, and not build their privacy teams. And a lot of times, especially in the bigger companies, where they might let go of or not be able to backfill if someone chooses to leave on their own, but then they can go and hire a contract position or even consultants. So that makes a lot of sense. I always think it's interesting, right? The obligation to have someone on board for a long time is still greater than, well, here's this project. And even the concept of flexibility of a contractor or consultant gives them more comfort than the long-term obligation of a full-time hire. And then even as you were talking about kind of the dip, I mean, we're coming off of summer, and I think Jodi's prediction, this is the busy time right now, and this time before we get back into the holiday period.
Yeah, and I also think the election is impacting that here in the United States, the hesitation at a macro level to add to staff until we know the outcome of that very, big event. I also think in general, people are still in a sort of, are we in recession? Are we not in recession? Are the Feds going to lower interest rates? How much? There still seems to be enough uncertainty that employers can sort of choose not to hire full time and try to backfill. But I can tell you this, one of our predictions early on in the year was, hey, hire your contractors now, because by the time we get to the end of this year, there's not going to be the same corpus of contract talent available, as readily available at the most desirable price points as there was at the beginning of this year. And we're starting to see that tension and pressure in a number of different ways. And one of them is also how long it takes to convert a contractor. So MT, I think we've got a few stats here that I think are really fascinating. 40% of our contractors who started assignments since 2023, right? So we're tracking this back about a year and 3/4 now. 40% of those contractors were offered conversion into a full-time employee since they started that contract. 90% of them accepted that conversion. So one of the guidances we've been giving people, Jodi, is maybe the best way to full-time employment is a contract, because so many of our contractors are then getting full-time jobs because they're the ones on site and our customers are now advocating for a person instead of a role. And it is very different when you are advocating for a human being who you can see the work product of, that's established some credibility and trust, versus the idea of a person who will do all of those things. And then the last thing, and I really want your perspective on this, Jodi, because I know you got, when we were prepping, had stopped me and you were like, oh, we got to talk about that. 245 days. That's the number of days that most of our customers are waiting until they convert a contractor. Now that number is way up compared to 2022, which was peak post-COVID hiring frenzy, where it was only 151 days. So we're talking about almost 100-day nexus of more evaluation, more contract before they determine it's time to convert. And I'm going to throw one more number in there, and then let me tell you what you think. The number of days until we lose a contractor on average, who then accepts a position not through the person they're on contract with somewhere else, is 261 days. So the numbers are starting to meet now of when I convert versus when I lose. And I think what we're starting to see is if you've got somebody in a contract role in privacy, you've got about 3/4 of the year to make a decision if they're full-time, or you are now in high risk period of time in which that person may leave for another opportunity.
Yeah, I think a few thoughts that I wanted to add. The first is the work hasn't gone down. The work is still up. So what companies are doing are just trying to figure out, how are we going to tackle all the work? Well, hopefully they're trying to figure out how we're going to tackle all the work as opposed to just saying, well, we don't need to actually do any of it. And, as many of those full-time people might have lost a role and now they're trying to decide where to go next, the idea of a contract position is really appealing. I get to test, the contractor gets to test out the company, and then the company really likes this because I get to test out. So it's sort of this, we're going to kind of feel each other out. Along the way, some of those people very well could be looking at other opportunities. So to your point of, a company has almost 3/4 of a year to kind of make a decision, because if you start not making that decision and leading the person down that path, they're going to use that time. Hey, thank you for the for the opportunity to work for you. And then I'm going to go shopping while I'm looking for something else because you ignored me. So the work is still here, and companies are just kind of playing with how they're going to get this accomplished. And you, as an employer, companies really need to appreciate people want consistency. They want to feel stable. And there's another batch of people who are kind of waiting to figure that out and might scoop them up.
100%. And it's really smart because it signals a couple of things. One, right now around 245 to 260, you're either going to flip them or you're going to lose them if they're really valuable, right? And that's a good window for employers to say, this is how long I have to evaluate. And then I need to know that I'm either going to potentially lose this person or I want to make a move on them. And maybe they don't want to make a move on every contractor. I mean, we have plenty of people who don't convert contractors, right? 40% is a pretty high number, though, of people getting converted on contract. That number is usually at like 12 to 18%. But it also says, what are you going to do when they leave? So now you have a window where you can start to really calculate your backup strategy if that person isn't the right full-time investment. And conversely, that's how long job seekers should be patient and wait, right? We have some contractors that are calling us 90 days into a contract being like, when am I going to convert? And you're like, that is so not the market right now, right? The market is 245 days. So you're going to need to wait at least another 90 days before we even start having that conversation with the employer, because that's not the timeline that people are converting unless you got something else and they need to make a decision one way or the other. So this is really to give job seekers and employers a sense of what's a realistic expectation. Now, I'll also say, as Jodi clearly pointed out, this is a moving target.
Yeah, Jared, I was going to add that if you're a contract, or, if you're a potential contractor listening and you're calling at that 90-day and you're saying, well, you got almost 245 days to go, think about the value you're adding to the company. And the more sticky you are, and the more you treat the company as if you were there full time, then the more likely they're not going to want to lose you.
That's right.
Because there's a technicality here of employment. That's a whole nother conversation. But the idea being you're going to be really sticky and really valuable to the work that's getting done. And if you were to leave, that's now a big hole that they have to start all over again. So again, if you're listening, treat it as if it's a full-time role for you and ingrain yourself, and the likelihood of that conversion, should be higher.
If you have questions for me and Jodi, put them in the question and answer channel. We'll try to answer your questions throughout the panel. Let's move on to remote versus hybrid. I think this is really interesting because it's very much connected to the contract staffing piece of these metrics. I think it's pretty accepted now that 85% of the jobs, it was a little higher last year. This year it's around 85%, are mostly hybrid, right? And that means 3 days or less in an office. So this is the new normal, right? Less than 15% of jobs are 4 to 5 days a week in an office. But how many of these hybrid jobs are actually fully remote? And as you can see, last year, that number dropped all the way down to 32%. So 32% of that 90% of remote or hybrid were fully remote. That number went up a lot this year. The reason why that number is up is because there's so much more contract hiring being done versus full-time direct hire. Full-time direct hire tends to be in an office, hybrid, if not fully in an office. Contract work tends to be more fully remote, or maybe a couple of days a month in an office. And so as more contractors get hired, the amount of jobs that we're seeing that are remote also increases sort of proportionally. And that's why you see such a nexus between 32 and 55. It's not because the direct hire marketplace is moving towards hiring people more remote. Quite the opposite. What we're going to see later is their speed of hire is actually getting even longer because they're trying to get people in an office. So it's taking longer for full-time jobs to get filled, which means the musical chairs of more full-time jobs opening because someone has left and creates a vacancy. If we're waiting for vacancies, not add to staffs, which we generally are in privacy right now, that is the cycle and pattern and behavior of the marketplace. And if you're motivated by being fully remote, which not as many people are as they used to be, though some still are, the best way to get fully remote is generally going to be through a contract. Jodi, so curious what you're seeing out there as it relates to in-office requirements.
Well, as a small fully remote consulting firm, we champion the concept of fully remote. And the reality is when I look to our clients and my peers and friends in the industry, I do see there's still a desire for people to be remote. There's only a handful of people I see who really want that in office. And I think it's just going to be this massive tug and pull of hybrid and remote and full. I do think it tends to go a little bit more with the size of the company. The larger the company, the more they seem to want more in office. Just this morning, Amazon announced again they're moving to 5-day in the office. So your larger companies are going to try and pull. It'll be interesting to see how they're able to fill and what will happen with that contractor turn, like you just described. From a people perspective, if those of you listening really want that hybrid piece, you might go the contractor route or potentially look for some of those smaller office areas, or a company that really has offices all over the place, because they tend to really skew the hybrid or remote area because their teams are already dispersed throughout the country or the world, depending on where you are.
We've put up some interesting stats here. Obviously, we've commented on the fully remote jobs causing the increase, or the full contract jobs leading to the remote jobs. But this first one is really fascinating. We find that to get somebody who's fully employed, that's in a fully remote job, to leave, they expect about a 25% increase if they're going to add a commute to the day. So they're fully remote. You want them to come into an office 2 to 3 days a week. The increase in compensation they're expecting is about 25%, which is why you're not seeing any of those people leave fully remote jobs and take in-office jobs, because they're not going to get 25% increases, largely speaking, in this marketplace. And we'll explore that a little bit in some future slides. Also worth noting that less than 22% of our direct hire privacy roles have been fully remote. And these are people that actually accepted offers and started jobs since calendar year 2024. And that's a pretty low amount relative to 2022, where I think that number was closer to like, what was it? In 2021, it was 80%. In 2022, it was like 63. So this is a big dip, a big dip.
So Jared, I think one other thing that will be interesting is to track. I don't think we have the data now, but to track over the next 1 to 2 years as the privacy field explodes. And we have all these new laws, which means companies are going to have more work. And then we have the privacy and, like you were describing, how the volume of work is going to expand and the number of privacy available people is not likely to expand proportional to the number of needs, and how companies will adjust to the fully remote and hybrid situations that we have here just to be able to get the work done.
It's a brilliant question, and it's a lot of dots, and there are a few things that might trigger what happens after to get to the remote piece, not the least of which is, just to go to your privacy and the comment I made, yeah, privacy and is kind of this trend that is being set or maybe is actually happening, which I think it is. But I can tell you what's not happening is privacy and more compensation. That is not happening, right? We are not seeing people take on additional compensation proportional to the additional responsibilities and tasks that they are being given in privacy programs. We are also not seeing people being given budget with which to backfill the responsibilities they no longer have the time to do effectively to take on more responsibilities. Yes, we're seeing a little bit, which is what all this contract boom is about, is because, and I'd love your opinion on this too, Jodi, most of the contracts we're getting are not for companies coming to us saying, I need a contractor who has a skill set to come and impact our business in a way that we don't have anyone here that can do that. That's not what we're seeing. They're taking their existing staff for the most part and saying, okay, let's level them up. Now you do more AI governance, or you do more ethics, or you do more cyber. But now we have a hole of who's going to do our PIAs or our DPAs, or who's going to handle ROPA, or who's going to handle our OneTrust, or who's going to handle these things that they had people to do, but they don't have the bandwidth. And so they want plug and play skills to come in. And this addresses the question that somebody asked in the channel here. Thank you, Joe, of where most of these contract positions land in the hierarchy. Are they entry level? I'll address your benefit question in a second. They're not entry level, right? They're very rarely entry level. I would call them, in a desired category, early career, meaning 1 to 6 years experience, which is the exact opposite of the demand that we had in 21 and 22, which was 4 to 10 years experience. And we're going to get into some of those numbers in a second. As it relates to the benefits question, Joe, I just want to say, it depends on what agency you work with. When you work with TRU Staffing Partners, we offer you benefits. We offer a 401k match. It vests 100% at the end of your first year. Very different, sometimes better than the benefits you get in a full-time employee. So ask those questions when you're contracting, because usually it's through a third party. And there may be some ancillary benefits that are actually better for you than full-time employment. A lot of our contractors don't want to convert, right? Only 90% said yes, and that was only a 40% that got offers. Some people like the contract lifestyle for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is more control over their benefits and choices about how their benefits get delegated. Jodi, are you seeing the same thing? Are people asking, in your mind, to augment staff with skills that they don't understand, or is it more plug and play things that they know they have a need for and expect expertise?
From a contract perspective, it would definitely be in line with what you've just described. Very tactical. I have this project, help me do these. I have too many PIAs. I have too many contracts. Very kind of tactical, where someone can come in with general privacy knowledge and be able to learn the business, but they don't have to learn how to do a privacy thing, where they've taken the existing staff who might need to know how to find Susie and Harry in the company and be able to move in that direction. For sort of those, I would say, more strategic kind of areas, that might be more like a consulting firm. So we might come in and help with those types of things. So for sure.
And let's separate strategic sometimes from operational, because I tell you what we do see at an executive level, which I would certainly consider working with Jodi is at an executive level. From a consulting perspective, a lot of people don't need the strategy. They need somebody to just come in and help run ops or help keep the ship on board. And that may or may not be right for a consulting firm. Sometimes they don't need strategy. They just need someone that is going to handle all the people and take escalations and be available if somebody has a question about something. We do get that at an executive level, but not a lot. most of the jobs, to Joe's question, are at that 1 to 6 years of experience, even at the attorney level.
Jared, I want to add to that because I
Yeah.
think one of the things that are really interesting, I would say we would see if there's a company who has an ongoing need. I need someone to review these DPAs. They come in all the time. I need someone to consistently review all the PIAs. I need some type of ongoing consistent where they would like to be able to hire a full-time person potentially. Like there's enough work to do that, but for all the reasons we've discussed and said, it's going to be a contract piece where it's, you know what, I need to implement this thing right here. It's sort of more of a short-term project. That I think tends to be more of the consulting path, you know, help me do this kind of finite start and end. But what we're seeing is I really want the contractor to be here, more that staff augmentation approach. So just a little bit of what we're seeing in the market.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Impact versus perpetual integration into the institution. Totally.
Yep. Yep.
I think that also speaks to this next slide, right? Here are your motivations for job seekers in 22 and 23. As you can see, even till really the third quarter of 2023, working remotely was what was driving most of the marketplace. MT, put up 2024. I mean, it has been burnout now for 12 consecutive months. Privacy people are working more hours than they've ever worked before. Most of these are corporate employees who are not getting paid overtime, whose bonuses are pretty locked in at a certain percentage rate, regardless of the amount of time they might be putting in. We saw money go up in the motivators, innovation buy-in go down. We saw working remotely come up and unemployment come down. We are starting to see privacy people want more money because they're burnt out, and sometimes those motivations 1 and 2 go hand in hand. Any comments here, Jodi, before we dive into some of the dollars and cents happening?
Well, I think the whole privacy and the privacy laws are increasing. They're not going down. For companies who might have done this a long time ago, now they have to go back and figure out how to do a whole program. Maybe they did the GDPR and CCPA thing. Well, we're done. Actually, you're not. Maybe, you know, you've started somewhere and you need a whole lot more to go. So the AI piece is coming in. Susie left over here. It didn't get backfilled. There's so many different reasons that the privacy team is just feeling pressure and they're not getting the resources and the budget that they want when they want it. So the need is here, and it's a continuous concept of how do I educate. In my mind, this is going to be the leadership wherever privacy sits, of educating. Here's why privacy is really important. Here's why we're going to need these resources. And until then, they're going to feel the pain of people leaving and hopping. Yesterday in my LinkedIn post, I called privacy a hot potato because it's kind of the same idea of who owns privacy. Well, it's going to happen from an individual perspective. People are just going to keep hopping until they find the place that they're going to feel valued. And
That's right.
you know, money is here, but they really want to feel like they're helping. Privacy people tend to care. We care a lot about data and people and wanting to impact our company. And if you can't do that, you feel like you just want me to work, and I'm not making the impact, they're going to look somewhere else.
Well, they're certainly going to look somewhere else if they're not making the impact and they're not getting paid what they think their value is. And those two things are starting to converge. So let's talk about salary increases at the point of hire. Some of this is new data that I think most of you will find very fascinating. In 2021, we had 98% of our placements got an increase from whatever job they were leaving behind to the one they took. And that increase was an average of 23%. That's pretty remarkable. But wait, it gets better. In 2022, 99%, pretty much everybody that got a job through TRU was getting an increase in comp. And the average increase in comp in privacy was 35%. And these 2 years were those windows I discussed before, where people with 6 to 10 or 4 to 10 plus years experience were the hot spot in terms of what the market wanted. There were so many people quitting that they had to be replaced, plus add to staff, plus the post-pandemic, hyper acceleration of growth for everybody. This was then. Now let's look at what happened in 2023. Only 65% of people got an increase from the job that they either got let go from or were leaving behind. And that average increase was only at 18%. That's still pretty healthy, right? I think the expectation that people would get 20 to 35% increases every time they moved a job is very unrealistic. And we can now look back in hindsight and say just how hyperbolic those years were for the privacy community. And they're similar to the numbers that we saw back in 17 and 18 during GDPR, but very different climate, right? It wasn't necessarily a global regulatory, change that was impacting the market. Now look at 2024. We're down to almost a little more than half are getting increases in comp, and the average increase in base compensation at the point of hire is only 8%. So this has not been the year to make a lot more money changing jobs in privacy. They're not getting more than they were making in years before, and they're certainly looking to hire less experienced people because they want to spend less money on talent right now. And this has created a lot of problems. Burnout is not only a result of not having enough people on staff to do the jobs, but sometimes hiring the wrong people to do the jobs and creating more work and more training and more oversight and less support for the people who have been there prior to the new hires. So Jodi, I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about all this.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that the market stabilized. We're seeing this in a number of different industries. So to keep talent, you're going to have to, if you're an employer listening, to keep talent, you're going to have that value piece. You're going to have, a great manager. People leave because there's not a great manager. They feel like I've worked too much. I don't feel valued here. And then 8% is obviously an increase, but it's not a huge increase. This is not the motivating factor for when someone's going to want to leave. And the other I would say is a lot of people really want to learn. They want to grow. They want to expand. And so understanding what your people want and need is going to be important for you to be able to keep them.
I would only maybe have a slightly different perspective and bit of guidance, which is because the increase at point of hire is so low right now, it does give employers the opportunity to come and just buy the talent, right? One way to get people to move jobs is give them a 25% increase in salary, because they're not going to get that from very many employers right now. So if you really want to use this moment in the marketplace as an employer to go and steal the best talent from the best logos, where, hey, we go get someone from this logo to come in and help us with our privacy program, that's going to go a long way. We're going to maybe overpay market rates because we know that'll win. And the result of that is a lot of people are taking the first offers they receive when they're more than 8%. If somebody gets an offer and it's a 20% increase and they're motivated, number one, by money, our guidance is this is a good offer. You're not going to get 3 other offers with a 20% increase in this marketplace. That's not the trend that we're seeing. So there is an opportunity here strategically. And I think this window is probably now another 3 months. And then it's going to be a free-for-all in the first quarter of 2025 for talent, because the demand is going to increase exponentially. The supply is already pretty diminished. And we're going to transition to this quickly with our last 2 minutes. As we move into AI, this, by the way, is just a graphic of the first stats you saw. You could see years of experience here. This is 2023. You could see they want less experienced people, but would pay more money for them, giving them bigger increases. And then, of course, here you can see 2024, where everybody's kind of uniformly getting similar nominal increases in comp. If we go one more slide, though, MT, this shows you what CPOs are spending their time doing, and that they don't have the time to do the jobs that they were hired to do, right? Particularly this last part at 15 to 25% AI governance. And if we go into this next slide, here are the AI governance salary ranges that we're seeing. And everybody wait for it, hold for it, because I think MT built it in. Do we have the animation? Do we have it? It's coming. I see it coming. No? Maybe not. But the AI governance salary ranges, you'll see here in the median. Here's the problem with the median right here. That median is not the middle. It's the median. And that median is so much closer to the minimum that I think it will be very difficult for privacy pros to leave behind privacy and take on fully AI governance jobs, because they're simply not paying as much as the privacy jobs are. And I'm curious if you're seeing the same thing, Jodi.
I am. The page before actually that talked about how much AI governance is taking over privacy people and how privacy people can't get to the privacy work is real. I am hearing this time and time again, where they just can't get to what they're supposed to do because they've been asked to take this on. So to the concept of more, that is very, very real. And trying to sort, those leaders need to sort through, how am I truly going to be able to get to it all? which is where going to the outside is going to be a helpful task for them.
100%. And I really can tell you that CPOs are not getting 25% increases in compensation relative to the 25% responsibility increase that they've received. I can assure you of that. That tension is coming to a head, I think, in the first quarter of next year. Quickly, let's go through our takeaways, and then we'll stay on for a few more minutes to answer some questions. Employers are running a greater risk of losing contractors that don't convert after 241 days. That is definitely a big takeaway. Contracting remains a practical and maybe the fastest way to get a full-time job and or a fully remote job. Only 22% of direct hire roles are fully remote anymore, guys. Burnout, still the #1 motivator for 12 months in a row. And that is the community of privacy professionals signaling to hiring managers they need more help. Percentage of salary increase is at an all-time low for the last 3 years at 8%. And finally, AI job definition and corresponding compensation remains ambiguous and fractured at best, and is not the Mecca Valhalla for privacy professionals to move to from a financial perspective just yet. And so we really need to see where that takes us before we can say this is where everybody's going to matriculate to. Jodi, let's take a few quick questions before we close. Jodi, how much of an impact do you anticipate tomorrow's Fed Reserve interest rates cut will have on hiring?
Well, so I think that's a really big question that goes to the overall health of a particular company and their fiscal strategy and their risk tolerance. I do think that a cut will help overall borrowing and spending. I also think that there are a lot of companies kind of waiting for the election to decide which comfort level they have. So I think overall, I mean, I am not an economist, it's just Jodi's view, but from what I hear and I read and I see, it will be more helpful to try and increase growth overall, but I don't think it's going to be poof and then you're going to see tons out here. It's going to be more of a comfort level with a overtime and kind of wait and see approach.
I agree. I also think that, what we've seen from a lot of the news media over the last few days, the Feds are only going to drop it by a quarter instead of a half point. And I think that sort of also changes the dramaticness of how the job market might react. So I don't think we're going to see drama. I think we're going to continue to see what we've been seeing for the last 2 years, which is a slow move towards a soft landing. Jodi, what physical locations are you seeing more hiring for hybrid or in-person privacy roles? And I'll answer that question after you.
And I'm just going to pass that one to you because I think you honestly have more data. Because for me, it's very market and company specific. I think some of the larger cities have larger companies, and if you skew tech, those and financial services, they seem to want all the people physically there.
Yeah, I think big time in New York, Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, mainly because they have real estate investment. And so that's a piece of it. And also mainly because it's an easy way for those organizations to terminate people who don't come back to the office. It's an easy way to very indiscriminately terminate employees with no other bias, just on the fact they won't come back to an office. And a lot of people are looking to find ways to indiscriminately eliminate headcount before their quarterly earnings reports. I would also say that the highly regulated industries, as Jodi mentioned, banking in particular, tend to lean towards more hiring in privacy because they have to have it. Healthcare and banking are the two biggest. And we've seen upticks in those two verticals. We didn't share that data, but we've actually seen job upticks in those two verticals because they're so regulated. They have to have these people. If they lose them, they have to replace them. One last question, then we're going to close out for the day. What certification or piece of knowledge, Jodi, would you recommend an analyst earn to improve their chances of getting an offer in the marketplace?
Well, I think if you're looking for general privacy, I would go to IPP and pick the certification that you think aligns best with what you're looking for. If you're looking to really hone in on the US, then the US one might be good. If you really want operational knowledge, then the CIPM might be good. If you really want to be more of a technical person, then pick the one that's T. If you really love global, then pick or pick the area that you're in. I would also say is to participate in the privacy community. And also from a technical standpoint, if you want to, all the different software providers have a variety of different kind of technical certifications that you can get in that area. If you're like the privacy and for AI, right, we have the various AI governance certifications as well. But beyond just the certification, I would encourage you to participate. Join LinkedIn, join the conversations, go to IAPP Knowledge Nets, join the IAPP virtual sessions. If you can attend an IAPP conference, then go to those. You don't have to go to the big conference though to join the privacy community. So the more that you participate and you learn, then you're going to be well positioned to network, have really great conversations, and be able to see and say, I have this certification and more knowledge to be able to offer to the company that you're interested in.
I'll give an addition, but maybe slightly contrarian opinion, which is if you're an analyst and you are aimed at getting employment through technical skill set, I would tell you to go get all of the OneTrust certifications right now, because from a contracting perspective, one of the fastest ways to get employment is to plug and play in with some OneTrust skills, because that is a skill set that falls to the bottom of the ecosystem that somebody wants somebody to plug in for and get. And I know there are lots of other technologies and you can learn them all, but the proliferation of demand for a hands-on plug and play technical skill set right now, for better or for worse, is OneTrust. So I would go get those OneTrust certs, particularly the cookie consent, particularly the PIA and data mapping modules. Those tend to be in highest demand. And look, if you've got strong Excel, SQL skills that you can marry with those skills in OneTrust, that gives you a lot of ability to do billable work for a law firm, service provider, consulting firm, or software company. And those are a lot of the places where corporations turn to go do that technical work. Now, look, you should also go and learn all the other modules, because you can get all their certifications and training largely for free online too. You know, Transcend and Mine, and there's a laundry list of other things, right? Radar First. There's tons of stuff out there that you can learn. Canopy. It just, where is your niche? Are you going to be a DPIA person? Are you going to be a breach review PIA person? What are you attracted to the most? And maybe finding out that skill set and the technology that is most widely used for that particular niche might be a good skill set to learn. Because again, as an analyst, you're looking for a way to plug in and do this really well. What I think you get with IAPP certifications generally is that ability to be influential, talk across the business, be able to be persuasive. And as Jodi said, and I agree with this, 90% of credibility is visibility. So being part of the community is as important as knowing and certifying what you know. But again, if the goal is to get employed, I think in this marketplace, having a technical skill set that you can plug into as an expert is going to give you billable work faster and probably lead to employment faster right now. That'll change in 3 months. Jodi, final thoughts?
It is an exciting time. And so much like how privacy laws just keep ebbing and flowing and we have to keep flexing, the same is going to be true here. So, thank you for the plug. We're original OneTrust partners. We're always looking for OneTrust help. So it's absolutely true. That is a great technical skill. The growth and knowledge is just going to continue. So being flexible and kind of going with where the market is going, I think will be a great place for all of you. And I'd love to connect. So thanks for having me.
Connect with Jodi here on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you haven't worked with TRU before, we'd love to show you what being represented looks and feels like. We don't get everyone a job, but we're happy to represent everybody as best as we can. And we thank everybody for joining us today. Tell your friends, join us again in a month. We'll have a new host, new information, new data to share with everybody. Have a great start to the fall. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.